Hello, podcast listeners. We know podcasts are a great way to catch up on a program that you may have missed on KSJE, and it's provided as a free service of this radio station. But you know, KSJE is now listener supported, and so while you enjoy this podcast, we hope that you'll also take some time to join KSJE. Become a member today. It's quite easy to do. Just go to our website at ksje.com/support and pick the level of support that best matches your budget. Thanks again for listening. Here's your podcast. Ten minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Thursday morning, the 5th day of March, 2026. Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Michlin. Thanks for tuning in to KSJE, 90.9 FM right here in San Juan County, New Mexico. In Durango, Colorado, you can hear us over the airwaves at 103.3 FM. And if you're anywhere else on the planet, just go to our website to listen, ksje.com, or listen through the KSJE radio app. It's great to have you all with us this morning. Also, welcome to our viewers who are joining us. The video of this program is streaming out live right now to the KSJE Facebook page and also to our YouTube channel. So welcome aboard, everyone. So glad that you are with us. Coming up this morning, it is our monthly visit from archaeologist Paul Reed. He will be joining us in the next few moments right here on KSJE, so stay tuned for that. We're talking about Chaco Canyon and access to Chaco Canyon, so that's an important topic, so we hope you'll stay tuned for that. Then, of course, Mick Hess is going to take us roving with the arts, our weekday classical music program. That is coming up after the news next hour at 9:06 on KSJE, so stay tuned for that as well. A reminder, of course, you can also connect with KSJE on other forms of social media like Instagram and Blue Sky and X. And of course, if you're a podcast listener, we publish new podcasts almost every day. So subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and discover new programs in your feed almost every day. Outside our studios here at San Juan College, it is 43 degrees at the moment. We're expecting an increase of sunshine today, but also an increase in wind. We could see wind gusts this afternoon between 45 and 50 miles per hour. And today's high in Farmington could reach, let me check, about 61 degrees. It'll still be windy overnight tonight with a low of 31. Less wind, partly sunny skies tomorrow, but cooler weather on Friday with a high of only about 43 degrees. I'll be back with my guest, archaeologist Paul Reed, right after this on KSJE. KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center. It's physician-led and supported by specialists, so patients can receive the treatment they need right here at home. When every minute matters, dedicated caregivers are here for you. San Juan Regional Medical Center, serving the Four Corners region for generations. Find out more at sanjuanregional.com. Ready to make a difference close to home? The University of Denver Graduate School of Social Work Four Quarters program is accepting applications for the 2026-2028 Master of Social Work cohort. Classes meet Fridays in Durango, letting you keep working. Learn more at du.edu/socialwork/fourcorners. Students can change the future with DU and apply now for lasting impact.
Now back to Studio A and the award-winning Scott Michlin morning program on KSJE.
And joining me this morning, as I mentioned, archaeologist Paul Reed from Archaeology Southwest is here with us for his regular visit. Always appreciate his very valuable time. Paul, good morning, and thanks for joining me.
Good morning, Scott. Glad to be back on with you this morning.
Yeah, good to have you with us, and thank you so much for being here. And our topic today is one that we've talked about before, but it's Chaco Canyon, of course, a place that is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts in this area, but mostly access to Chaco Canyon. What's come up on your radar?
Right. So there's a proposal now to chip seal, which is kind of a, somewhat of a quick and dirty paving process, a good portion of the road that gets visitors and folks into Chaco. And this is something that a number of us have some concerns about. So, so we've sort of engaged the Farmington office of the BLM to talk about, what's being proposed and sort of try and sort out, what's the impetus to do this at this point in time.
Right. And so I guess it's kind of a pro-con thing, right? Because certainly folks, Chaco Canyon is certainly worth getting to. It can be difficult to get to in some parts of the year. There are people who live in that area who access their homes and areas through roads that we're talking about, or the road that we're talking about, but they have issues about it as well. So there's kind of a lot of things to unpack here and unpeel from the onion when you just talk about paving the road to Chaco Canyon or chip sealing the road to Chaco Canyon, correct?
That's right. And I think, probably on the face of it, it seems like just something that, we should be doing. This is, by the way, a San Juan County sponsored project. And again, we want good roads for folks to travel on. So I think, again, on the surface, kind of a no-brainer. But one of the issues that really comes to mind as we think about this is once we get to the end of this road, we have this amazing place known as Chaco Canyon, with what we call it today, and just, dozens and dozens of very sensitive cultural sites, sacred sites, archaeological sites. And, and unfortunately, in these days of declining federal budgets for different things on our landscape, an increased visitor load for Chaco itself would really provide some challenges for the staff there, and might lead to changes in the way people are allowed to access Chaco. So, I think as we look at this, we just want to be sure that the entities proposing this, San Juan County, who is working through BLM, as this is mostly BLM in the area on the lands around, that they go through a very thoughtful process to do this. The other part of this, Scott, is that this is not a new proposal, so this has some history. The county originally proposed doing this back in 06 and 07, went through a process. They had received some money appropriated by then Congressman Tom Udall, so that tells you how far back this was.
Right.
Before, Mr. Udall became a senator. So this money was available. There was about $1 million to go through a process to study this. They did an archaeological survey. They did an environmental survey of the zone around, the immediate zone around the road and some distance out. And then, a lot of local opposition came up. There were certainly people who favored having this road chip sealed and providing better access. But that's kind of an interesting thing to think about as well, because if we think about different zones out in, the checkerboard region, which, as we've talked at some length, is very mixed land jurisdiction.
Right.
There are many, many Navajo families who live out there. They are not on, the Navajo Indian reservation formally, so they're in this checkerboard zone. And so, there's some challenges, have been through time, and unfortunately continue to be, for folks living in the area to get basic services, to have roads maintained and the like. As I was out there fairly recently, just about a month ago, I was looking at a variety of different roads that were under San Juan County jurisdiction. And, and if the goal is to provide access for the most number of people, then there certainly are some other candidates in that area that would serve more families than just taking the road into Chaco. So I think that that's part of what those of us asking the agencies to kind of slow down this process a little and think about it, are just asking for some consideration of, what are the goals of this project, and what are the implications if, it is then easier to get into Chaco Canyon and we don't see sort of a necessary increase in funding, for the folks who are working in Chaco, trying to maintain, the very ancient sites there and really manage those visitor flows, in a reasonable way.
Right. And I guess that is kind of the underlying issue here, right? Is that no one denies that access to Chaco Canyon is important, and to the neighborhoods or the areas around there, no matter what road we're talking about, whether it's emergency vehicle access in case of emergencies or what have you. Sometimes, in some wet weather and muddy weather, it can be pretty difficult to get a vehicle out there, right? Even in the current conditions. And so I guess the idea being, if it's easier to get to Chaco Canyon, could we kind of love the park to death with increased visitation, kind of like what you see at the Grand Canyon, for an example, I think, and some of the things they've had to do with the Grand Canyon to manage the throngs, literally throngs of people that want to see that great national park, but also be able to manage it so people have an enjoyable experience when they're there. Is that kind of a good comparison?
Yeah, exactly, Scott. And really what you said, the term living it to death really is the heart of the concerns that a lot of folks, in the environmental community and the preservation community, are debating, you know, over this. And I think, the folks working at Chaco right now are not really haven't, at least so far, taken a very public stand one way or the other on, this proposal to have this road sealed. And and as we've seen kind of in recent years, the Park Service is trying to sort of stay out of some of the larger issues, I think, and some of that flows from different politics of the time, although this certainly goes back a few years as well. And I think, again, we can look at sort of a cost-benefit analysis and try to sort out what might be best for, all these different considerations. The one issue about this, okay, so we're talking roughly about 8.5 miles from where the pavement currently ends. Well, let me take folks out there. So you're at 550. There's a Sinclair gas station, right?
Right.
You make a turn onto County Road 7900. You travel about 4.5 to 5 miles, and then you hit an intersection at the top of a hill. You turn right then to go to Chaco Canyon. That is County Road 7950. So the first 3 miles of the access into Chaco got chip sealed or paved, quite a time ago, about 30 years ago. And so that runs 3 miles. You then hit a very well-maintained gravel road that the county, works on several times a year. And at this point, having been driving in and out of Chaco for a few decades, that portion of the road is in really good shape at this point. That's about 8.5 miles. You make a big curve as you're about to drop down to the wash crossing at the wash known as Escavada.
Oh, we may have lost Paul Reed there for a moment. So he is describing the approach to Chaco Canyon, and we will wait for Paul to reconnect. There he is. He's back with us. Paul, hopefully you can hear me. We lost you there for a second as you were describing the approach, but keep going.
The excitings of tech here.
That's all right.
In the remote reaches of northern New Mexico. So anyway, going out on the road, then you hit a point where San Juan County jurisdiction leaves off and the Navajo Nation and or the Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA, take over. And that's about the last just over 4 miles all the way to the park boundary.
Right.
So if this project was to go through, then we would have about 11.5 miles of a paved road, chip sealed road, certainly more all weather than it is now. And then we would hit a stretch where there would still be some significant challenges to get all the way into the park. So this is sort of a portion of the issue of accessing Chaco, but it isn't a complete solution. And so that's one of the things that we're sort of pondering as well.
Gotcha.
One of the challenges then with this last little 4 mile segment is literally getting across Escavada Wash, which, with rains, can run very heavily with the summer monsoons. And, depending upon our snow years and our winter, can run pretty substantially in the springtime as well.
Right.
And that can become completely impassable in either direction. So that would continue to be a significant challenge unless there was movement to go ahead and then finish the rest of that road getting into Chaco.
Right.
So, again, this is just something that I think we should ponder.
Yeah, and I guess too, then it's, to me, and I'm not an engineer, but it sounds like it would need maybe some type of additional engineering work if you wanted to make that an all-season approach to Chaco Canyon through that wash. And maybe that's why that's not part of this proposal, as you say. We're showing the map right now on the screen. So I think the area that you're mentioning that's under consideration is this green line, this proposed upgrade on 7950, which is what the BLM is kind of showing, and it kind of describes the directions, as you mentioned, coming in from 550 from the north.
Right. And, in the San Juan County jurisdiction ends where the green stops, going from east to west. So, at this point, there would be no way for a bridge crossing to be included in this project. It would have to go through a completely different process. And
sure.
And, bridging and or putting a massive culvert through there on Escavada, could conceivably, I did some work, just as an archaeologist with Navajo Nation in the past decades. Bridges cost almost as much as, substantial stretches of road to do things. So that's definitely, a different consideration as well.
Right.
And it's hard to say exactly how things would flow, the way roads get identified for upgrading and et cetera. But again, we were just asking that the BLM go through a more public process on this. The way this project was originally put forward, they sent out letters of consultation to interested and affected Native or Indigenous nations, 3 or 4 years ago, and said, hey, we're considering this project. And then the project hit sort of a period of stasis, and now it's been introduced again. So, as always, our concern when we talk about any kind of land modifying projects that could affect cultural resources is that the public have a full opportunity to be part of a process. And, and that's, I think, we can certainly have different sides on this, but I think having multiple views heard in a real public discussion is the way to achieve, a solution that may not make everyone happy, but at least gives everyone with one concern on this side or the other the opportunity to be heard. And that, of course, is very important in our democratic society.
Right, very true. And I guess, Paul Reed, if we're not talking about paving or chip sealing the entire access road into Chaco Canyon, then are the concerns about maybe increased visitation to Chaco a little maybe not expected, because there'll still be that last 4 miles of fairly rough terrain, I guess, to cross, and so there'll still be that kind of, I guess, hindrance to the tourists wanting to get out there? They're still going to really want to be able to get there if they really want to get there?
That's true. And, if the project was to go through, then, we could potentially foresee big tour buses coming to that crossing and then turning around and going back.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, we understand how the world works. Funding comes up. The funding is generally specified for a specific project. You go through that process, and then there might be another process to try and get that additional funding. As always with things, in the zone around Chaco, the multiple land jurisdictions make it very challenging to sort of look at the landscape, maybe in as comprehensive a way as a lot of us would prefer to. So we kind of have to piecemeal it and, have different considerations for this piece of land versus this piece of land. And, I certainly have some questions about whether we end up ultimately with the best decisions for how to manage sensitive landscapes like the one around Chaco. But again, committing to a public process to think about this and look at the alternatives. I think that's, what most of us want to see happen for this particular process. And in that sense, we get folks out, I would expect, if depending upon how this unfolds, with the BLM in San Juan County, that there would be public meetings. And, there could be folks coming out in the different chapters here. We're close to Maguzi chapter and Counselor chapter, folks coming out and saying, hey, if you're going to put money into upgrading the road.
Oh, and we've lost Paul again. Wow, it must be
says more than just chip sealing a single road, but trying to think more about how maybe a transportation plan might unfold in this area.
Sure. Right, as part of a larger, maybe long-ranging plan, I understand. The map that we're showing, again, shows really clearly, I think, that checkerboard area that we have talked about numerous times, you and I, on this program, and just how many different land ownership, surface ownership is what the map says, right? And you see the different colors on the screen right now about what we're talking about, whether it's state or tribal, Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, all those different areas, and that's kind of what you are talking about as well. And Paul Reed, I know you and I've talked too about energy development in this area as well. It's a very sensitive area geologically and geographically, and so better access, would that mean maybe more options for development, or are these energy companies going to develop it if they can get there? I mean, I know they build their own roads sometimes, and dirt and whatever, and so a paved or chip sealed road wouldn't necessarily mean that they would do more energy development around the area, or would it? What do you think?
Well, I think the advantage of a paved road, of course, is that it's easier for anyone wanting to get into this area for any reason to access it. But that's right, Scott. It really depends a lot on, the flows, the price of oil, ultimately on world markets. And of course, this connects to the larger issue, which, we talked about, at some point last fall, and we're still kind of waiting to see what the current administration wants to do with the 10-mile zone of protection and the withdrawal of, of the minerals in the zone around Chaco. If that withdrawal zone was to be revoked, and this project moved forward in terms of chip sealing, that could certainly lead to an increase in the development of oil and gas resources in, some real sensitive spots around Chaco. So that does take us back to just trying to think about these issues in somewhat of a larger regional way, and not just sort of saying, hey, here's a road, we have a proposal to pave it. This seems like the direction we want to be heading in 2026. Let's go ahead and do that. So, yeah,
Right.
sort of, I think I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but
Right, I hear you. No, I hear you. And that's important, though, I think, too, because we've talked about that
it's
before.
just something that should be considered, I think, in this larger context. And because, this project affects this project, and then that in turn affects this third project over here. And, I can understand probably the point of view that some folks listening might have, that, if this is progress, it's 2026, we want to move forward. We want the world to be a better place. We want to not drive on dirt if we can drive on pavement. So that's, those are concerns that we all have. I mean, my family and I moved up to where we live now at the top of about 3.5 miles of a dirt road. And, so my perspective personally has shifted a little bit about this issue, because when we were discussing this from, say, 08 to 10 or 12,
Right.
15, almost 20 years ago, I was living in suburban Farmington. So, what we experience personally does affect, I think, our perspectives on how we look at different issues. And I know from having talked to folks who work in Chaco and live in the local area that, having that road, more all weather and sealed would certainly be an advantage from their perspective. So,
Right.
Again, this is a great reason to really have a very thorough discussion about this project as it moves forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess hearing from all those different perspectives too, right? And so that's important, whether you work out there, or you live out there, or you just visit out there. I mean, everybody should have I guess, a seat at the table, at least a way to express their concerns or support or whatever it might be to whatever's going on. That's how democracy should work, I think.
Right. And that's kind of the messy side of it. And
Right.
knowing that, at the end of the day, whatever decision is reached by San Juan County and the BLM in conjunction is definitely not going to make everyone happy.
Right.
So, but again, having your voice heard and feeling that, at least there is a good consideration of the alternatives.
Right. And
that's
so,
a good thing.
right. And so we think that the BLM is taking the lead on this. Is that what they're doing, and will be accepting comment, or would this be a San Juan County issue, or both?
Yeah. BLM will be taking the lead, but, the county is, a significant partner, as it's their proposal. They were able to, arrange for funding. I think it's $800,000 to do this project. And then, what we were told in a meeting with BLM the week before last was that this will go into a National Environmental Policy, or NEPA, public process. They will do what's termed an environmental assessment, or an EA, and there will be some announcement of a public process. What we haven't really seen clearly yet, now about a year plus into the new administration out of Washington, D.C., we don't know how that process is exactly going to unfold. Some of the regulations that were in place for the larger NEPA processes, with certain so many days of comment, et cetera, those have been changed considerably and reduced. So we're sort of waiting. I guess what I'm trying to say is to see how some of these new processes will unfold. I would suspect that this is going to be a more accelerated process than we may have seen in the past. So that's the reason why, when this became, it kind of came on the radar, and I talked with some environmental partners, talked with all of our close tribal partners to kind of get a take on this, that we started to look into it. We were able to get this meeting with BLM, and then, really be ready if there's a process announced and, a fairly short, say 15-day, 14-day period of comment. That's not a lot of time to get folks who may not be aware of the issue sort of up to speed, so they can come with their opinions and their concerns.
Right. And I guess that's the important part too, because when these things do open up, right, if you want to have your voice heard, you've kind of got to act within that time frame, or else you don't get your voice heard. And so that's, I think, the point that you are making this morning and that we are sharing this morning, and it's an important one to make. I want to ask you too a bit about just the management of a park, an area the size of Chaco Canyon, because it is, pretty massive when you go and visit it. I mean, I usually spend the whole day because there's so much to see and look at. And so to be able to manage people that are kind of spread out, there's not a park ranger at every location. It's just would be cost prohibitive at the moment, I think. And so again, to be able to manage even the current amount of visitors has got to be a challenge, much less, an increase in visitation. And so that's also part of this conversation that we touched on earlier, right?
Right. It's the whole visitor flow issue. So let's contrast Chaco, for example, with Mesa Verde National Park. Mesa Verde gets somewhere around 500,000 visitors a year. Of course, it's all weather, fully paved access to get up to Mesa Verde. At this point, though, you pay.
Oh, we've lost Paul again, so we'll let him reconnect.
And essentially right now at Mesa Verde, folks can see some parts of the park in a limited way. But if you want to do tours, the Cliff Palace, Balcony House, some of the other places, you then have to book a separate, get a separate reservation for another $20, unless that price has changed. So it's not quite a reservation system, and no one has proposed that for Mesa Verde. But 500,000 people, Mesa Verde, Chaco gets around 55 to 60,000 visitors, depending on the year.
Right.
So we've got a tenth of the visitation, and really the opportunity. And one of the things I love about Chaco, this is just, a personal statement, is to go in at a time of year. And I was fortunate to be there a couple times in January doing some different work when there maybe isn't an overwhelming crush of other people there. So you can kind of experience, the splendor, the astonishment of this ancient landscape and these sites, and interact in, respectful ways, depending upon who you are and what you would like to do there, without, waiting in line to do a tour, without paying an additional $20 to do it. So, and I'm not suggesting that Chaco is going to become a place where 500,000 visitors go to every year. But the implications of more visitors is less access to different parts of,
right,
some of the very special places in our world. So that's something that should be part of this discussion as well. When we looked at this issue, 15, 20 years ago, there was some pushback from folks who wanted to proceed with the project because, they weren't going to be concerned with what happened on the other side of this road. It was sort of we're going to focus on the road itself. That's the nature of our project. And, we're having a pretty specific focus on that. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you know that what's on the other side of the road is this very amazing sacred landscape that's important to all of the indigenous tribes in New Mexico and the Southwest, is a World Heritage Site, and is, one of the most important places, in my mind, in the American West and in the world. So that just causes us, I think, to maybe think this through a little more carefully.
Sure. Well, or maybe to have some other partners too, I guess, to say if this goes through, or as we plan for this, obviously there'll be some time during construction, but could there also be a additional attention, funding, money to the park to be able to manage and suspected and expected increase in visitation if this were to go through, and to plan for that and not be surprised when all of a sudden you've got to deal with another 20,000 people a year or more or less or whatever the case may be. And I guess that's the issue. The other part I wanted to just point out too is, I think, as you were mentioning at Mesa Verde, if you sign up for those tours, in addition to your admission to the park, that's a smaller group of people. It's kind of a managed group. And so it's not a full throng of folks streaming into these special tours. It is limited in its scope to maybe 20 or 30 at a time or what have you. And so that keeps it more manageable. But again, you need people, staff, to be able to do that.
Right, exactly. And, I certainly feel like those opportunities are great ones to be able to go and see places that are a little harder to get to and require the ranger-led tour. So those are good things. But it does just change the experience a little. And that's, again, one of the things we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, very true. Well, Paul, we have run out of time today, and your internet connection is hanging in there, but I know we're taxing the limits of it perhaps, so I do appreciate your time. And with that being said, he disappears, and now he's back. But Paul, thanks so much for being with us and bringing this really important topic to our attention. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to chat with you, Scott. And yeah, let's do it again. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next month. That is Archaeologist Paul Reed from Archaeology Southwest, my guest right here on KSJE Farmington. Did you enjoy that podcast? We hope that you did. And if you did, share it with your friends. And if you really want to keep podcasts like this coming, please support KSJE. You can do it easily online at ksje.com.